Book VI. Canto VII. The Legend of Calidore. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Morgan Scorpion. The Faerie Queene by Edmund Spenser. Book VI. The Legend of Calidore. Canto VII. Turpine is baffled, his two knights do gaine their treasons meed, faire Mirabella's punishment for loves disdaine decreed. Like as the gentle hart it selfe bewrayes, in doing gentle deeds with franke delight, even so the bafer mind it selfe difplayes, in cancred malice and revengefull fpright. For to maligne, to envy, to ufe fhifting flight, be arguments of a vile dunghill mind, which what it dare not do by open might, to worke by wicked treafon wayes doth find, by such difcourteous deeds difcovering his bafe kind. That well appeares in this difcourteous knight the coward Turpine, whereof now I treat, who notwithstanding, that in former fight, he of the Prince his life received late, yet in his mind malicious and ingrate he gan devize to be avenged anew, for all that fhame, which kindled inward hate. Therefore, so foone as he was out of view, Himfelfe in haft he arm'd, and did him faft purfew. Well did he tract his fteps, as he did ride, yet would not neare approach in daungers eye, but kept aloofe for dread to be defcryde, until fit time and place he mote efpy, where he mote worke him fcath and villeny. At laft he met two knights to him unknowne, the which were armed both agreeably, and both combynd whatever chaunce were blowne betwixt them to divide, and each to make his owne. To whom falfe Turpine comming courteoufly, to cloke the mifchiefe, which he inly ment, gan to complaine of great difcourtefie, which a ftraunge knight, that neare afore him went, had doen to him, and his deare Lady fhent, which if they would afford him ayde at need, for to revenge in time convenient, they fhould accomplifh both a knightly deed, and for their paines obtaine of him a goodly meed. The knights believed that all he faid was trew, and being frefh and full of youthly fpright, were glad to heare of that adventure new, in which they mote make triall of their might, which never yet they had approved in fight. And eke defirous of the offred meed, faid then the one of them: Where is that wight, the which hath doen to thee this wrongfull deed, that we may it avenge, and punifh him with fpeed? He rides, faid Turpine, there not farre afore, with a wild man foft footing by his fide, that if ye lift to haft a little more, ye may him overtake in timely tide, eftfoones they pricked forth with forward pride. And ere that little while they ridden had, the gentle Prince not farre away they spide, riding a foftly pace with portance fad, devizing of his love more, then of daunger drad. Then one of them aloud unto him cride, bidding him turne againe, falfe traytor knight, foule woman wronger, for he him defide, with that they both at once with equal fpight did bend their fpeares, and both with equal might againft him ran, but the one did miffe his marke, and being carried with his force forthright, glaunft fwiftly by, like to that heavenly fparke, which gliding through the aire lights all the heavens darke. But the other ayming better, did him fmite full in the fhield, with fo impetuous powre, that all his launce in pieces fhivered quite, and fcattered all about, fell on the floure. But the ftout Prince, with much more fteddy ftowre, full on his bever did him ftrike fo fore, that the cold fteele through piercing did devoure his vitall breath, and to the ground him bore, where ftill he bathed lay in his owne bloody gore. As when a caft of faulcons make their flight at an hernefhaw, that lies aloft on wing, the whiles they ftrike at him with heedlefle might, the wary fowle his bill doth backward wring. On which the firft, whofe force her firft doth bring, her felfe quite through the body doth engore, and falleth downe to ground like fencelefle thing. But the other, not fo fwift as fhe before, Fayles of her foufe, and paffing by doth hurt no more. By this the other, which was paffed by, Himfelfe recovering was returned to fight, Where when he faw his fellow lifelefle lie, He much was daunted with fo difmall fight, Yet nought abating of his former fpight, Let drive at him with fo malicious mynd, As if he would have paffed through him quight. But the fteelhead no ftedfaft hold could find, But glauncing by, deceived him of that he defynd. Not fo the Prince, for his well learned fpeare Tooke furer hold, and from his horfes backe Above a launces length him forth did beare, And gainft the cold hard earth fo fore him ftrake, That all his bones in pieces nigh he brake. Where feeing him fo lie, he left his fteed, And to him leaping, vengeance thought to take Of him, for all his former follies meed, With flaming fword in hand his terror more to breed. The fearefull fwayne, beholding death fo nigh, Cride out aloud for mercy him to fave, In lieu whereof he would to him defcry Great treafon to him meant, his life to reave. The Prince foone hearkned, and his life forgave. Then thus faid he: There is a ftraunger knight, The which for promife of great meed Oft to this attempt, to wreake his hid defpight, For that himfelfe thereto did want fufficient might. The Prince much mufed at fuch villeny, And faid: Now fure ye will have earned your meed, For the one is dead, and the other foone fhall die, Unleffe to me thou hither bring with fpeed The wretch, that hyr'd you to this wicked deed. He glad of life, and willing eke to wreake The guilt on him, which did this mifchiefe breed, Swore by his fword, that neither day nor weeke He would furceale, but him, where fo he were, would feeke. So up he rofe, and forth ftreight way he went Backe to the place, where Turpin late he lore. There he him found in great aftonifhment, To fee him fo bedight with bloody gore, And griefly wounds, that him appalled fore. Yet thus at length he faid: How now, Sir Knight, What meaneth this, which here I fee before? How fortuneth this foule uncomely plight, So different from that, which earft ye feem'd in fight? Perdie, faid he, in evill houre it fell, That ever I for meed did undertake So hard a taske, as life for hyre to fell, The which I earft adventured for your fake. Witnefle the wounds, and this wide bloody lake, Which ye may fee yet all about me fteeme. Therefore now yield, as ye did promife make, My due reward, the which right well I deeme I yearned have, this life fo dearely did redeeme. But where then is, quoth he half wrothfully, Where is the booty, which therefore I bought, That curfed caitife, my ftrong enemy, That recreant knight, whofe hated life I fought? And where is eke your friend, which half it ought? He lies, faid he, upon the cold bare ground, Slaine of that errant knight, with whom he fought, Whom afterwards my felfe with many a wound Did flay againe, as ye may fee there in the ftound. Thereof falfe Turpin was full glad and faine, And needs with him ftreight to the place would ride, Where he himfelfe might fee his foeman flaine, For elfe his feare could not be fatisfide. So as they rode, he faw the way all dyed With ftreames of blood, which tracting by the trayle, Ere long they came, whereas in evill tide That other fwaine, like afhes deadly pale, Lay in the lap of death, rueing his wretched bale. Much did the craven feeme to mone his cafe, That for his fake his deare life had forgone, And him bewayling with affedion bafe Did counterfeit kind pitty, where was none. For whereas no courage, there's no ruth nor mone. Thence paffing forth, not farre away he found, Whereas the Prince himfelfe lay all alone, Loosely difplayd upon the graflie ground, Poffeft of fweete fleepe, that luld him foft in fwound. Weary of travell in his former fight, He there in fhade himfelfe had layd to reft, Having his armes and warlike things undight, Fearelefle of foes, that mote his peace moleft. The whiles his falvage page, that wont be preft, Was wandred in the wood another way, To do fome thing, that feemed to him beft. The whiles his Lord in filver flumber lay, Like to the evening ftarre adorned with dewy ray. Whom when as Turpin faw fo loosely layd, He weened well, that he indeed was dead, Like as that other knight to him had fayd. But when he nigh approcht, he mote areed Plaine fignes in him of life and livelihead. Whereat much grieved againft that ftraunger Knight, That him too light of credence did miflead, He would have backe retyred from that fight, That was to him on earth the deadlieft defpight. But that fame Knight would not once let him ftart, But plainely gan to him declare the cafe Of all his mifchiefe, and late lucklefle fmart, How both he and his fellow there in place Were vanquifht, and put to foule difgrace. And how that he in lieu of life him lent, Had vow'd unto the Victor, him to trace And follow through the world, where fo he went, Till that he him delivered to his punifhment. He therewith much abafht and affrayd, Began to tremble every limbe and vaine, And foftly whifpering him, entyrely prayd T'advife him better, then by fuch a traine Him to betray unto a ftraunger fwaine. Yet rather counfeld him contrarywife, Sith he likewife did wrong by him fuftaine, To joyne with him, and vengeance to devife, Whileft time did offer meanes him fleeping to furprize. Nathlefle for all his fpeach, the gentle Knight Would not be tempted to fuch villeny, Regarding more his faith, which he did plight, Or were it to his mortall enemy, Then to entrap him by falfe treachery. Great fhame in lieges blood to be embrewd. Thus whileft they were debating diverfly, The Salvage forth from out the wood iffewd, Backe to the place, where his Lord he fleeping vewd. There when he faw thofe two fo neare him ftand, He doubted much what mote their meaning be, And throwing downe his load out of his hand, To weet great ftore of forreft fruit, Which he had for his food late gathered from the tree, Himfelfe unto his weapon he betooke, That was an oaken plant, which lately he rent by the root, which he fo fternely fhooke, That like an hazell wand it quivered and crooke. Whereat the Prince awakning, when he fpide The traytor Turpin with that other Knight, He ftarted up, and fnatching neare his fide His trufty fword, the fervant of his might, Like a fell lyon leaped to him light, And his left hand upon his collar layd. Therewith the coward deaded with affright, Fell flat to ground, ne word unto him fayd, But holding up his hands, with filence mercy prayd. But he fo full of indignation was, That to his prayer nought he would incline, But as he lay upon the humbled gras, His foot he fet on his vile necke, in figne Of fervile yoke, that nobler harts repine. Then letting him arife like abject thrall, He gan to him object his haynous crime, And to revile, and rate, and recreant call, And laftly to defpoyle of knightly bannerall. And after all, for greater infamy, He by the heeles him hung upon a tree, And baffled fo, that all which paft by, The picture of his punifhment might see, And by the like example warned be, However they through treafon do trefpafle. But turne we now backe to that Ladie free, Whom late we left riding upon an Asse, Led by a carle and foole, which by her fide did pafle. She was a Ladie of great dignity, And lifted up to honourable place, Famous throughout all the land of Faerie, Though of meane parentage and kindred bafe, Yet deckt with wondrous gifts of natures grace, That all men did her perfon much admire, And praife the feature of her goodly face, The beames whereof did kindle lovely fire In the harts of many a Knight, and many a gentle Squire. But fhe thereof grew proud and infolent, That none fhe worthy thought to be her faire, But fcorned them all, that love unto her ment. Yet was fhe lov'd of many a worthy peere, Unworthy fhe to be belov'd fo deare, That could not weigh of worthinefle aright. For beauty is more glorious, bright, and cleare, The more it is admir'd of many a wight, And nobleft fhe, that ferved is of nobleft Knight. But this coy damzell thought contrarywife, That fuch proud lookes would make her praifed more, And fuch the more fhe did all love despife, The more would wretched lovers her adore. What cared fhe, who fighed for her fore, Or who did wayle or watch the weary night? Yet them that lift their lucklefle lot deplore. She was borne free, nought bound to any wight, And fo would ever live, and love her owne delight. Through fuch her ftubborne ftiffnefle and hard hart, Many a wretch for want of remedy Did languifh long in life confuming fmart, And at the laft through dreary dolour die, While fhe, the Ladie of her liberty, Did boast her beauty had fuch foveraine might, That with the onely twinkle of her eye, She could or fave, or fpill, whom fhe would hight. What could the Gods doe more, but doe it more aright? But lo the Gods, that mortall follies vew, Did worthily revenge this maydens pride, And nought regarding her fo goodly hew, Did laugh at her, that many did deride, Whileft fhe did weepe, of no man mercifide. For on a day, when Cupid kept his court, As he is wont at each Saint Valentide, Unto the which all lovers doe refort, That of their loves fuccefles there they make report, That when the rolles were read, in which the names Of all loves folke were fyled, that many there Were miffing, which were dead, or kept in bands, Or from their loves exyled, or by fome other violence defpoyled. Which when as Cupid heard, he wexed wroth, And doubting to be wronged or begyled, He bad his eyes to be unblindfold both, That he might fee his men, and mufter them by oath. Then found he many miffing of his crew, Which wont doe fuit and fervice to his might, Of whom what was becomen no man knew. Therefore a Jury was impaneld ftreight, To enquire of them, whether by force or fleight, Or their owne guilt, they were away convayd. To whom foule infamie and fell defpight Gave evidence, that they were all betrayd, And murdred cruelly by a rebellious mayd. Faire Mirabella was her name, whereby Of all thofe crimes fhe there indited was. All which when Cupid heard, he by and by In great difpleafure wilde Capias Should iflue forth, to attach that fcornfull lafle. The warrant ftreight was made, and therewithal A Bayliffe errant forth in poft did pafle, Whom they by name there Portamore did call, He which doth fummon lovers to loves judgment hall. The damzell was attacht, and fhortly brought Unto the barre, whereas fhe was arraynd, But fhe thereto nould plead, nor anfwere ought, Even for ftubborne pride, which her reftraynd. So judgment paft, as is by law ordaynd, In cafes like, which when at laft fhe faw Her ftubborne hart, which love before difdaynd, Gan ftoupe, and falling downe with humble awe, Cryde mercy, to abate th' extremity of law. The Sonne of Venus, who is mild by kind, But where he is provoked with peevishnefle, Unto her prayers piteoufly enclynd, And did the rigour of his doome reprefle. Yet not fo freely, but that nathelefle He unto her a penance did impofe, Which was, that through this worlds wide wildernefle She wander fhould in company of thofe, Till she had faved fo many loves, as fhe did lofe. So now fhe had been wandring 2 whole yeares Throughout the world in this uncomely cafe, Wafting her goodly hew in heavy teares, And her good dayes in dolorous difgrace. Yet had fhe not in all thefe 2 yeares fpace Saved but 2, yet in 2 yeares before, Through her difpiteous pride, whileft love lacked place, She had deftroyed 22 more. Ay me, how could her love make halfe amends therefore? And now fhe was uppon the weary way, When as the gentle Squire, with faire Serene, Met her in fuch mifeeming foule array, The whiles that mighty man did her demeane With all the evill termes and cruel meane, That he could make, and eke that angry foole, Which followed her, with curfed hands uncleane, Whipping her horfe, did with his fmarting toole Oft whip her dainty felfe, and much augment her doole. Ne ought it mote availe her to entreat The one or th'other better her to ufe, For both fo wilfull were and obftinate, That all her piteous plaint they did refufe, But rather did the more her beat and brufe. But moft the former villaine, which did lead Her tyreling jade, was bent her to abufe, Who though fhe were with wearinefle nigh dead, Yet would not let her light, nor reft a little ftead. For he was fterne and terrible by nature, And eke of perfon huge and hideous, Exceeding much the meafure of mans ftature, And rather like a Gyant monftrous. For footh he was defcended of the houfe Of thofe old Gyants, which did warres darraine Againft the heaven in order battailous, And fibbed to great Orgoglio, which was flaine By Arthur, when as Unas knight he did maintaine. His lookes were dreadfull, and his fiery eyes Like 2 great beacons glared bright and wide, Glauncing afkew, as if his enemies He fcorned in his overweening pride, And ftalking stately like a crane, did ftride At every ftep uppon the tiptoes high. And all the way he went, on every fide He gazed about, and ftared horribly, As if he with his lookes would all men terrify. He wore no armour, ne for none did care, As no whit dreading any living wight, But in a jacket quilted richly rare, Upon checklaton he was ftraungely dight, And on his head a roll of linnen plight, Like to the Moores of Malaber he wore, Which with his lockes, as blacke as pitchy night, Were bound about, and voyded from before, And in his hand a mighty yron club he bore. This was Difdaine, who led that Ladies horfe Through thicke and thin, through mountaines and through plaines, Compelling her, where fhe would not, by force, Haling her palfrey by the hempen reines. But that fame foole, which moft encreaft her paines, Was Scorne, who having in his hand a whip, Her therewith yirkes, and ftill when fhe complaines, The more he laughs, and does her clofely quip, To fee her fore lament, and bite her tender lip. Whofe cruel handling when that Squire beheld, And faw thofe villaines her fo vildely ufe, His gentle hart with indignation fweld, And could no longer beare fo great abufe, As fuch a Lady fo to beat and brufe. But to him ftepping, fuch a ftroke him lent, That forced him the halter from his hand to lofe, And maugre all his might backe to relent, Elfe had he furely there been flaine, or fouly fhent. The villaine, wroth for greeting him fo fore, Gathered himfelfe together foone againe, And with his yron baton, which he bore, Let drive at him fo dreadfully amaine, That for his fafety he did him conftraine To give him ground, and fhift to every fide, Rather then once his burden to fuftaine. For bootlefle thing him feem'd, to abide fo mighty blowes, Or prove the puifance of his pride. Like as a Maftiffe having at bay A falvage bull, whofe cruel hornes do threat Defperate daunger, if he them affay, Traceth his ground, and round about doth beat, To fpy where he may fome advantage get. The whiles the beaft doth rage and loudly roare, So did the Squire, the whiles the Carle did fret, And fume in his difdainefull mind the more, And oftentimes by Termagant and Mahound fwore. Nathelefle fo fharply ftill him purfewd, That at advantage him at laft he tooke, When his foot flipt, that flip he dearly rued, And with his yron club to ground him ftrooke, Where ftill he lay, ne out of fwoone awooke, Till heavy hand the Carle upon him layd, And bound him faft. Tho when he up did looke, And faw himfelfe captiv'd, he was difmayd, Ne powre had to withftand, nor hope of any ayd. Then up he made him rife, and forward fare, Led in a rope, which both his hands did bind. Ne ought that foole for pity did him fpare, But with his whip him following behind Him often fcourged, and forced his feet to find. And other whiles with bitter mockes and moes, He would him fcorne, that to his gentle mind Was much more grievous, then the others blowes. Words fharply wound, but greateft griefe of fcorning growes. The faire Serena, when fhe faw him fall Under that villaines club, then furely thought That flaine he was, or made a wretched thrall, And fled away with all the fpeed fhe mought, To feeke for fafety, which long time fhe fought, And paft through many perils by the way, Ere fhe againe to Calepine was brought. The which difcourfe as now I muft delay, Till Mirabellaes fortunes I do further fay. Canto VII. Book VI. The Legend of Calidore.